Hi everybody, and welcome to the first of what I'm going to call Technique Tuesday. I like to name things, as you might have gathered. And the technique that we're going to be having a look at today is watercolouring, but as a sort of more gentle introduction and understanding how watercolour paint works, I thought that we would start today using watercolour crayons. Now I have two variations on a theme. I have these, which are Derwent Inktense. They're gorgeous, they're very highly pigmented, they're ink, and you can't go wrong with them. I mean, you just can't. They're lovely to use. And the other pencils that I have are these pencils, which are more of a professional pencil, and they're by Faber-Castell, and they're called Albrecht Dürer watercolour pencils. That's what they're called, and they each have their proper pigment name on them, which you could recognise with any of the other Faber-Castell products. The dry crayons, their paints, their markers, anything, they all have the same colours. So that, if you find this colour in this watercolour and you find it in the dry and you find it in the paint, they're all going to be the same. They're a lovely set. But all of these, both the Derwent and the Albrecht Dürer, they're not cheap. But there's no easy way into it, because if you buy a cheap set of watercolour crayons, you'll think it doesn't work very well. And it's not that it doesn't work very well or that you're doing something wrong. It's just the cheap ones don't have the same amount of pigment in them. So you kind of get what you pay for. Right, what I want to do is I'm working my way through these Edith Holden file folios, and I'm making progress. I'm getting on. And I've got this bifold tag that fits in one side of here. This is the front of it. I can't remember if I showed you me making it, but I think I did. That's the front of it with these coloured and embossed die cuts on. And on the back, I wanted something really Edith. And what says Edith more than dog roses? These. They're ubiquitous in the English countryside. I don't know about America, I don't know if you have them there, but they are everywhere in the summer, and they are so scented and so beautiful. It's a joy to paint them. They're just lovely. So I've done this on actually coffee stained paper, and I wondered then if I did it on ordinary white paper if there'd be much of a difference. So I did it on white paper, and you can see there's quite a lot of difference, really. This stands out much more. Now, I don't know which I prefer in keeping with the file folder. I think this one actually fits in more. It's more subdued. But for the purposes of this, I will show you on white paper because it stands out more. There are a few basic things that we need to know about how watercolour crayons work. So I'll just I'll show you what I'm talking about. The lead, as you might call it, in these watercolour crayons is not lead. It's pigment, pure pigment, with a delivery system. And the Albrecht Dürer pencils have a very good delivery system. Now, watercolour works best on watercolour paper. I didn't want to use watercolour paper because, well, I'm going to put it in my journal, and watercolour paper tends to be a bit thicker. But I didn't think that you would all have watercolour paper at your disposal. And it's another great big huge topic. There are so many different kinds of watercolour paper. Honestly, it's ridiculous. Once you find one you like, stick to it. Arteza actually do a very good watercolour paper. Their premium brand is very good. I think it comes in 2 pads. It's relatively inexpensive compared to other watercolour papers, and it's good. You get a good finish with it. Right, so I'm going to use these 636 watercolour crayons, and I'm also going to use a water pen. Now, I'm sure you've seen these before. You probably all own them. They're just a pen, but the ink part, if you like, is a water reservoir, and you get different ends on them. This one's a bit shot actually, but it'll do. And the only other thing that I am going to use is a fine liner. Now you want a waterproof fine liner. It's got to be waterproof, otherwise it's not going to work for our purposes. This is a Unipin fine line and it's 0.2. Okay, so that's important. It's an important part of this. So let's just have a look at how watercolour actually works. I'll use this one, which is called Burnt Carmine. And you put it down on your paper. You put in colour down, you put in pigment down. Now you can put it down really lightly. You can put it down sort of medium like that, or you can really, really, really put a lot of pigment down. And that's the way that we get lighter colours really with watercolour. This one, let me add the water to it. And you'll see it does move, definitely moves. And this one. Once you add the water, the pencil lines disappear, depending on how much water you add. And then this one, there's a lot of pigment in there, and you can pull that pigment around a little bit. More so on proper watercolour paper, I must say. So that's it. That's the idea, the whole concept, if you like. Right, now comes the bit that I know you're all going to go, we're going to have to sketch something to paint. Don't go, I can't do that. I'm willing to concede that maybe you can't do that at this stage. That's fine. Don't worry. Don't think I can't do watercolours because I can't draw. It's just not the case. You can. You can stamp. If you've got stamps, you can put a stamp down on your page and you can use that. You can colour within the lines and, you know, it's a good way of learning. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good way of learning. Or if you find an image that you like, you can trace it. Use greaseproof paper for that you use for the oven. Or if you've got tracing paper that you use as vellum in your journals, use a piece of that and just trace an image that you like out onto your page. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's really, really acceptable. And when you get further into this and you realise you really want to do it, but you still feel you can't draw, there is a thing called Saral, which is a artist's transfer paper. And I'll show you that as we proceed along our watercolour path. But in the interim, I am going to do my best to sketch a dog rose. Now they're fairly straightforward. They've got 5 petals. So when you're sketching, hold your pencil back. Don't hold it like this or you'll end up with a very... It's kind of hard to push your hand when it's like that. It's much easier if you do it back. So I need 5 petals. And I don't think you can see this. I'll press on a little harder. This is a very light pencil. So I really, I'm really just making 5 petals. I don't know if it particularly looks like a dog rose. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to make this 5 here. So there we are. It's just, you could draw a circle and then draw 5 indents if you wanted to. I'm not sure that you're seeing this particularly well. The light's washing it out a bit, I think. Let me put it in a little bit harder and see if you can see it. Right, there we go, easily peasily. Now I just want a stalk coming up here, so it's just a line, and then I want a bud, which is just a U shape. Just draw a U shape, then draw some sort of lugs on the side of it. And then a circle at the top, and then just 2 petals behind that. and there's your bud. Now that's just easy, you can do that. I'm going to put a little thorn on there because it's a rose after all, and then I'm going to draw my stem coming out of here and going down. One line is amply sufficient. I'm just going to put my thorns on to remind me though that they're there. And then we have leaves, we need leaves. So I'm going to have mine sort of coming out as if they were coming out from behind here. So they're fairly easy shapes to draw. Everybody can draw a leaf shape, I think. So that's going over my stem, but that's okay, that's fine. And then this is the one at the top. Excuse me. So here we're just going to have a little bit of the one at the other side. That's a weird shape. And then a smaller bit there, which is the other side of that. And then coming up here, we're going to have some more leaves. And get the smaller ones nearer the bottom. Excuse me. So this is, you know, it's no masterpiece, but it will give you an idea. And then the top one goes there. Okay, so we've got something that we can colour. So let's start with the rose itself. Now it's a very, very light. Oh, thank you. Mr. F furnishing me with Diet Coke. It's a very, very light pink, and as we get closer into the centre, it's even lighter. So we want to maximise our pigment round the outside, and then as we wet it, we can pull it in lighter and lighter with more and more water into the centre. So let's just go around the edge. Now hold your pencil in a similar sort of manner and put your pigment down. Don't sort of press your pencil into the paper, especially paper that's not watercolour paper. Well, any paper, because what will happen is it'll indent the paper, and that's not what you want. So that's all I'm doing. I'm literally going round, colouring in the edge of my petal. That's all. You can do this. You so can do this. Just around the edge, and where the petals overlap or meet, I'm just making a mark down like that. And I don't really want any detail about shadow or anything like that at the moment. I'm just putting my first coat of colour onto there, because where one petal lies behind another, it'll be darker because it'll be in shadow, of course. So let's see if that's enough or how it's going. So I'll just get my water brush, rub it on a piece of kitchen towel, make sure it's clean, and then just start putting water over that, and then dragging it, before it dries, drag it into the centre. Don't let it dry, because once it dries you won't move it. So there we are, one done already. So right up to the edge, work fairly speedily, because as I say, you don't want it to dry. You want to just pull that ink in, the pigment in towards the centre. So you're leaving all the dark around the edge, but you are using the water to just pull that down in, like so. So always go from your pigmented area into the centre. Wet it all like that and pull it in. That's it. That is the secret to it. So you can see already it's not looking bad. watercolour on here. Now these, they're a bit darker, so I'm just going to put a bit more pigment on here. These new petals are quite dark, but don't push down into the paper. Just lay your pigment on top of the paper. And then these are quite dark at the back, at the top. And draw around there. And then it's sort of got a little indent running down there. So I'm just going to put some colour there. We'll do the excuse me. Do the same thing here. Pick up your pigment, but there's a bit too much there, so wipe it off and then drag it down. Same here. Pick up your pigment. There's a lot on there, so just wipe the pigment off your water brush. Lovely, that's nice. And then around here. So pick the pigment up, make it move like that. And then this in the centre, just smoosh it out like that. So you're not pressing on with anything, you're not pressing to get more water out of your water pen. We'll leave that to dry and think about life for a minute, because what you don't really want to be doing is adding, you can, it's just a different technique, is adding more pigment while this is wet, because you can't move it very well. In fact, you barely can move it. So let's think about the leaves then. Let's just sharpen this pencil. So I want the centre. The centre is dark. If you look at the dog roses, it has a dark centre. So make yourself a line, not a definite line. And then under here, where it's under the flower, it's going to be dark because it's in the shadow. So we'll put some pigment down there because that's where it's going to be at its darkest. And then if the light's coming down here, this is going to be in the shadow as well. So we'll put a little bit of pigment down there. Then here, the same thing, the bit that's under the flower is going to be dark. And if you think about it, it's just common sense. I'm not asking you to work out perspectives or anything like that. It's just common sense. The bit that's under something else is not going to get the light, so it's going to be darker. Where that bends up, it might catch a little bit of light, so I'll leave that. And this is the bottom one. So the same applies. That's probably under there a little bit, getting a little bit of shadow, bit of shade. This might be catching the light. If it's bent like that, it might catch it, so we'll leave that like that. Do the same, we'll make this end dark as if it's bent over. So this is maybe the most difficult bit, where you kind of have to think, well, where's the light coming from? What would be light? What would catch the light? And if you think it would catch the light a lot, leave it with no pigment on at all, because that will end up being the lightest, because it'll be the white of your paper. So that's probably the bit that you kind of need to get used to. Or copy, print something out from Pinterest, trace it off and then copy it till you get the hang of what's what and what goes where. You soon will. But until you get experienced, I would recommend that you copy. Right, so that's those leaves, one colour on anyway. So we'll come down to these leaves down here. We'll draw the central line on. Now these don't really have any shade, but the light will be coming from somewhere. It'll either be coming from this side or from this side. I've sort of implied it's coming from this side by where I've left my lights here. So it's going to be the same here. It's coming from this side. So I'm going to make it look as if it's bent that way. By darkening this part down, I'm making it further away. The eye perceives it as being further away than the light colours. So I'm going to put the light at the end, the dark at the end and the dark there, and it will make it look like it's bent over. But I do want to add another colour to this as well, just to brighten your day. Now if the light's coming here, this side might be completely in the dark, like me. So I'll put that dark pigment all the way along that side and a little bit up there. And the same here. Let's have a look. I'm going to do the same, because that's part of the thing, you know, if the light's one way for one thing, it's that way for everything. It doesn't move. Right, okay. Now, is that making sense to my eye? Yeah, it's okay. I'm now going to go in with a lighter green, and what will happen then is if we don't add very much water, it'll blend but still sort of stay in position. So I'm going to add this lighter green here at the end. But I'm going to leave that centre spot there white, because that's where I think the light is absolutely on. And there I think is slightly in the shade, so I'm colouring it with that, but I do think we've got light on here. So I'm going to leave the centre of that with no pigment on at all, like so. Now here I'm suggesting that the light is really on the leaf, so I'm going to put a little bit of light colour there and a little bit there, but I'm going to leave that, the centre, white paper. That's the lightest colour I can have, is the white of the paper. And here I think would probably be all coloured, because it's, I don't think that's catching any light where it is. So that's basically your biggest thing, is where is my light? So the light's coming there, so this side's possibly not catching too much of it. That may be. Same here. Be consistent with your light, that is the critical thing. But don't worry too much about your marks, because we're coming in with water. We're going to move everything around. So don't worry too much. Just putting a bit of light in through that dark as well. Right, the other thing that I want to do while I've got the green in my hand is, where's my pencil? I want to put some little, what are they called, carpals? I'm not sure what they're called, these bits here, that just sort of pop open when the flower pops open, and they stay on. And there's usually 4, so I'll draw 4. And there, I'm going to make those dark green right next to the bud. And just a little line coming off them of the dark. Then I'm just going to go in with my lighter green. Like so. Right, okay. So you can sort of see where we're going. So it's in with the water then. So I'll start at the top. If you start at the top, then you're not going to have your hand in. You know, I appreciate you're probably right-handed, but for me, starting there makes sense, and then I can keep moving down and I'm not working over wet. So let's just add some water to this green. You really do need to sort of activate these colours. You do need to put water on them. You can't just sort of say to yourself, oh, well, I like it like that, I won't put water on it. You can, but if you're going to put a background on, because they haven't been sort of used up, if you like, when you put your background on, they'll dissolve, so they'll move into your background. So make sure that anything that you put on, you've got water on it. So over the entire, we can always go back and add more, always. So they just melt together. You see the difference between the two once you put water on it. It's amazing. It's like magic. It is actually like magic. And if you've got too much pigment on your pen, wipe it off on your paper. I want to keep this bit particularly light, so I don't want much pigment. And if you want to move it around, keep it wet. Once it dries, you've pretty much had it. So the two greens are smushing together, but still separate colours. You can still sort of see that there are two colours there. There are parts that I'm going to have to go back over that either need more colour or the line is too defined. But that's fine. It's okay. It was never meant to be completed just one pass over and go. And I hope that you don't feel that you have to hurry this, because the joy of it is the process. If we just wanted a picture, we'd cut one out of Edith and stick it in and we'd be done. I guess now you're thinking, why did I not just do that? I've got a bit too much pigment on there, so just wipe it off on my towel. So don't be afraid, is what I'm saying. Just never be afraid of watercolour. Just don't. I mean, it's watercolour paint. What's it going to do to you? Nothing. And before you know it, you'll really have this technique down pat. And once you've understood how watercolour moves, etc., and you move on to actual watercolour paints, you'll find them much easier than this, to be honest. This is just a nice introduction into what watercolour does. But really, once you get experienced and you move on to the paints, it really is a much easier medium to work with, to be honest. So there we are, that's not too bad. Let's put the stalks in because it's looking a bit separated. I'm going to use this one, which is burnt umber, and just draw my line down, put my barb in, my thorn, and that'll be quite a thin stem up to there. It'll be thicker at the top where it's supporting the weight of the bud, but coming down quite thinly. And then this one goes behind the leaf there. I'm not sure I meant to do that, but that's what's happening. And this is thicker than this. My thorn. And all stems get thicker as they get nearer to the ground, so let's thicken it up a little bit. I'm just going to put another barb, another thorn on there, because these dog roses really are thorny. They absolutely are. So that looks a bit better. We're joined up now. I feel better about that. So I need to put some water onto my stem, otherwise same thing will happen when we come to make the background. If it hasn't been, I'll say used up, if it hasn't been wet previously, it will just mix up with the background. Got a bit of a water blockage. So all lines are easier if you do them in one sweep. You will find it easier, I promise. Right, so there we are. I've used up the brown. It's not going to interfere when we come to doing the background, if we do a background. Okay, so let's look again then at the pink. It's bone dry, so let me find my pink again. So I'm just going to have another look at this bud, and I just want to add a little bit more colour around the top there, a bit more pigment to it. Make it come alive a little bit, and a bit more down the middle. These definitely need quite a bit more pigment. The picture that I was looking at, these are really quite dark. New, I suppose. And then back to our big beauty. So I'm just going to add more just around the edges. Just make it a bit more defined and slightly more uneven, really. I don't want just a solid line around the edge. So make your line, thick in some parts, thin in others. Just interesting, more interesting than just... So I'm laying down quite a bit of pigment here, actually. Quite a lot of pigment coming off my pencil onto here. So hopefully I'll have plenty to move around and decide what I want to do with it. This I think is quite dark here, so I'm going to put a lot of pigment onto there. Right, so I've got a lot of pigment there, I've got a lot to play with. So let's just clean my brush of the green and get onto this. So anytime where you know you've got a lot of pigment on your brush, just wipe it off onto a cloth, a piece of kitchen towel, piece of lint-free cloth, anything at all. If you're using proper watercolour brushes, then a piece of lint-free cloth is great, and just stroke it down it. Right, so that, I think that's the bud pretty much done. I like that. It looks like a bud to me. So that brings us onto here. So right next to the line, wet all the pigment and pull it down. Now by pull it down, I don't mean pull it down, I mean pull it into the centre. Like that. So that, I'm not sure you're seeing this, to be fair, but it's just softening it. Giving us some really nice colour around that edge. This is the bit that I want to leave quite dark. Right, okay. Yeah, I think that looks much nicer. It probably needs a bit more definition on it, but we'll leave it as it is like that. And then let's just have a look at the dark on some of these leaves. Just the bits that go underneath the flower, really, I think need darkening up a bit. So I'll just get rid of the pink on my brush. Just adds a bit more definition. It places them in space. So where you think it should be darker, that's where to put your dark pigment. And as I say, if you're copying, you'll have something to go off, and that's not a bad thing. Don't think it's a bad thing to copy. It's not. Certainly not while you're learning. That possibly needs some light green in there. I'll have a look. That needs to be fairly dark. As does this one, I think. Now, bearing in mind that I'm only using, well, I'm using 160 paper actually, so it's a good lot thicker than ordinary. It's twice the thickness of ordinary copy paper, but it's the stuff I regularly put in my journals, and it's holding up quite well, really. If you were using a watercolours and an ordinary watercolour brush, I don't think you could do it. I wouldn't like to try it on this paper. I think it would just wrinkle, and it just hasn't, it's not made for that. It wouldn't do. So these ones are okay. I'm quite happy with what we've got here, really. darker. So you're always pulling away from the pigment into the lighter area. That's kind of the rule. Wet your pigment, then pull it away. But as I say, if you are copying, then of course you can see what you're doing because you've got, you know, whatever it is that you're copying from. And don't feel that that's bad. You must get out of that thought that it's bad because you're copying. Yeah, when you've been doing it a while, I'd like to think that you can sketch things yourself. But right now, copy. I mean, if you want to copy this, let me know and I'll stick it on the Facebook group. But it's no great shakes, to be honest. So I'm just going to go around the edge here because I just want this darker. And this one too. So now I'm really laying some pigment on it in certain places. And this one too, but probably just really round the edges. Don't really need it anywhere else. So I am using it like a pencil now. I'm pushing down on it like a pencil. I'm putting that pigment down. Don't worry about bits like that where you go over. Just colour them in. Nobody will know. Nobody will ever know. Right, so I've got to wet them now to use them up, as it were, as I said. Otherwise, put the background in, we'll end up with not the colour we thought we had. So I'm just going over the bits I've just put in, just a bit of water. Like so. So this is literally around the edge. Okay. There we are, I think that's the whole thing done. Right, so now we need to have a look at the centre. And for my centre I'm using Naples yellow. Any sort of olivey green, that sort of colour will do. And they have quite large centres, these flowers. So lay down some yellow pigment in the centre. Don't have to colour it in completely because we're going to wet it and then it can get dragged around. Like so. And just take your pigment off and go around it. So the edges kind of fade away a little bit. And I need to dry that to put something else on top of it. Doesn't take long to dry because in actuality there isn't much water there. You know, that was full when I started and it's pretty much full now, so you know, you don't use a lot. So I'm using this olive green colour, which is called May Green. Very nice, May Green. And I'm just drawing a sort of almost a circle, but it's not joining up like that in the centre. And then it has another one sort of down here. So it's very loose lines like so. That's all that you need there. Then get your dark brown and just need some spots And this is kind of the end of the, I don't know, what are the things that have got pollen on? Anthems, stamens probably. So I'm just making a random pattern, and I'm going to weight them down here. The flowers kind of tilted this way, so I can see more of them down here. So some large, some small, but more down here. And then I'm going to get my orangey colour, which is called terracotta, and put some in. And they do seem to be dots. I think they must be the ones that have still got the pollen on them. I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm guessing here, and it doesn't really matter. I'm just painting what I saw. That will do for the time being. There will be more that happens to that, but that's pretty much us finished with the water brush, unless we see something, well, the background possibly. So right, I'm now going to get my fine liner out, and this is where it all comes together for me. You can leave it there if you want to, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I would recommend, however, is that you put some dots in with your fine liner in the black, because it does bring this centre to life. So even if you're not going to go around it with your fine liner, I would recommend that you do this. So there we are, that's the centre of the flower now. And I'm going to go around everything that I've done with this fine liner, and I'm going to hold it quite far back and just draw around the shapes. But I'm going to draw around them twice, and I'm going to draw around them very randomly, very sketchy. The first one might be pretty much on the line, but the second one's definitely not. And it gives a very sketchy look, and it's a look that I like. You might not, in which case, don't do it. But to me, it just brings it all together, and I really do like it. And this is why you need a waterproof pen, because if you're going to put a background in, then if it's not waterproof, it's just going to run into your background. Let's finish the stalks off, stems, whatever they're called. So 2 random lines. One just doesn't seem to work. You need 2. Some detail in the leaves, following the centre line that we put in before with the green. So this is why it doesn't really matter if you go over the lines, because you're going to go over the lines at the end anyway. Going to have to turn this around a bit. That's another thing. It seems to be a myth that goes around the art community, that turning your work is bad. I don't know who invented that. I don't know why they invented it, but it's simply not accurate. Turn your work. If it's going to make it easier for you to turn your work and put a line down or colour in or whatever it is, do that. I really don't know where that came from. don't do this until your work is dry, because you'll end up breaking your fine liner. They don't like going over wet media. Believe me, I've tried. Impatience sometimes gets the better of you. Right, so that's everything done now apart from a big centre rose. And I think you'll agree that outlining just brings it to life, really. So we're going to go around here with the same sort of process of the squiggle. So you see, it doesn't really matter what shape your rose is, just 5 sort of petals. So there we are. That's pretty much it done, apart from a background. And I think I'm going to put my background in blue, because the Edith Holden page with the dog roses on the background is blue. But it is a very light blue, so I might have to look for a lighter blue. Wow, that's a real sky blue, isn't it? Light phthalo blue. Yeah, it's a nice colour. I'll use it. That was easy. Right, so I'm just going to use my pencil on the side, and I don't want too much pigment. Some areas I want more pigmented than others, but not, not massively. So I'm just going around, putting some pigment here and there. It's like doing a rubbing from my cutting mat, which is quite interesting because it's not very clean and tidy. But I have a new one. I have a new cutting mat. Hilda took pity on me with my poor mat and sent me a lovely new turquoise one, so you're in for a treat the next time you see me. I'm not going right to the end of there, or down to the bottom of there. That's about that. Now this is when it really is handy to have a brush, because a water brush is quite small. So if you've got a brush, now is the time to use it. I'm going to start at the top, so as I'm working my way down. Now it's a light colour and I've put it on lightly, so we're not going to see anything dramatic happening. See, there's still some brown in there that I hadn't used. So I'm just dissolving it. That's all I'm doing. And I obviously haven't dissolved that brown properly because it's pulling off into the background. It's just a light tint, just a nod, just to say we've done it. Just to make it look slightly more like Edith's. Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy with that. I don't know that you can see that at all actually, but it's blue. And there we are. I think we're done. Watch this and then maybe go back and have another look at it and see how I've put the pigment on where I want it to be darkest, then picked it up with a water brush and dragged it down into these areas that I want to be the lightest. Same with everything, the leaves, whatever. You put it on quite thickly where you want it to stay, if you like. Then you dissolve it with your water brush and move it around to where you want it to go. So I think that'll look nice on the back of that tag that I showed you. I'll cut it out, ink around it and whatever, and I think it'll look quite nice. Thanks for joining me today. We'll carry on with more watercolour next Tuesday because we have only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to do. But have a go at this. If you've got any watercolour pencils, or you're thinking that you might like watercolour, and you get some watercolour pencils, have a go and just be reminded of the fact that it's not wrong. You're only playing. It's just pencils and paper. It's what we played with as children. You can't really go wrong. I just hear those words in your head. Okay, so I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye.